The Warhammer bunker starts a crusade, there's a new Tyranid combat patrol, and we can now play Warhammer Underworlds without cards? Let's check out White Dwarf issue 497. Hello, I'm Miranda, and we're going to jump right in here to our letter from the editor, Lyle Lowry. Hi, Lyle. He's talking about the bunker and what they're doing this month. They are now starting Crusade battles, which will include some combat patrol battles. They sort of wrapped up the last narrative campaign, actually, and we are now jumping into Crusade. So for those of you who like to run those sorts of games, this will be the issue for you. He also talks briefly about the new combat patrol list coming out for Tyranids, which is listed further in the issue. There's a fun contact letter from one of the White Dwarf fans out there, Mr. Perota Eid. Actually sends a snapshot of him reading White Dwarf out in Antarctica. So that brings up the question, where's the weirdest place you've ever read White Dwarf? I don't really have very interesting stories for myself. Anytime I've read it in an airport, I've always been talked to about it. So that's probably the most interesting place for me, but what are your stories? In Ask Grombrindal, a reader asks about how Lasguns work, and since Grombrindal isn't in the 41st millennium, I think he's just giving his best guess here because it still doesn't really explain why Lasguns kick. The next article here is the Worlds of Warhammer. Again, it's a deep dive into the Age of Sigmar lore, and in here we are exploring Ghyran, the realm of life. And they go over the various different areas like Hammerhall Ghyra, Decrepita, the Shimmer Falls of Glorifus, sounds like a dirty joke, Cursewood, the Living City, Moss Cairn, and Slickston. And they're really well-rendered worlds. I like that they include an image of each of them and explain, how like the Living City is a kind of symbiosis of the Sylvaneth and the human world, or Sigmarites, in this city that's kind of protected by tree bark, or Decrepita, where things go right before they're about to die, or the Cursewood, or it's really well-rendered. It's a cool, interesting segment. Again, it's basically the only way I've been learning about the Age of Sigmar. And yeah, Ghyran, much more interesting than Aktra last time. Okay, moving over to the Warhammer bunker, there's a new campaign being started where the team is going on Crusade. They are using the Crusade rules from Tyrannic War and Crusade Pariah Nexus. They also included 4 additional rules for how they will be running their games, so if you want to follow along with that, or if your game store follows along with that, make sure to add those rules to it. They have a few interesting elements of it, like infighting, where if you're on the same team and you fight each other just to try and get points, you can still develop your own armies, but you don't really score any points for doing so. So it just adds a little bit of interest to the Crusade rules. And I don't know if any of you out there are actually following all of these. I know some of you have followed the Combat Patrol, and I don't know if any of you did the Slide Crown Sundering, but if you keep up with these, I think so far these have been really successful campaigns. And the February painting challenge will be to paint leaders and heroes. The new 40K mission for this month is called Mobile Warfare. It includes some cool special rules like rapid retasking that allows your units to shoot and charge in the turn in which they fell back, which is huge. There's also a special rule called Destructive Momentum, in which when you destroy an enemy unit within range of an objective marker, you have a chance of gaining a CP. This mission has corner deployment with 4 objective markers, and each turn you can choose which one is the prime objective marker for each of you. You can even stack the same one, and that affects how many VP they are worth. The new Age of Sigmar Battleplan is called the Strongholds Treasure. Okay, so this was an exciting article to read. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always been a fan of Warhammer Underworlds. I think the idea of really getting these little boxes that have a complete force in them, they're really easy to paint up. You get, 3 to 7 models or something in a given box. They're pretty easy to collect, they're always really well designed, and you play really quick games on these little game boards. The only thing I didn't especially care for were having to build decks. Like, I'm not a deck builder kind of gal. And I liked that they had rival decks because you could just have a pre-built deck that would just help make the game go along easier. But they have simplified it even more, folks. There is now War Unbound. So in this issue, they go over the rules for playing Warhammer Underworlds without any cards at all. So it becomes a really big objective game. There are some changes, obviously, to how you play the game, but they're gonna make the games even faster to play and a little bit more brutal. They even have a suggestion for running a campaign so you can, you know, just have a day of playing a bunch of Warhammer Underworlds with your friends. It's gonna be easier to teach because you don't have an entire card mechanic to take into account, and I don't know, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to give this one a try. So the basic training for this issue is a little bit more limited, so I only got so much out of it. It is for those of you who play Age of Sigmar, because I guess the new Flesh Eater courts are out, and the basic training in here specifically talks about how to fight them, and it's really useful if you play them to know how other opponents might fight you. So it is very specific to the Flesh Eater courts, and if you play them, you're gonna wanna see that. Moving over to the Hobby Hangouts segment, Dan talks about all-over washes and, you know, how you use them to tie your miniature together. And there's several examples in here of him using like a cool tone or a warm tone to take all of the base colors that you've put on your miniature and uniform them somewhat. Like the colors still stand out, but that wash just helps, again, tie it together, like he's been walking through the same dust storm or whatever, or it just makes the model look more cohesive. And so there's examples of how he uses those washes in here. For the satellite uplink, the bunker of the month is Long Island Wargames, and they've got some really beautiful submissions from their player base there of gorgeously painted models. Next article is another Age of Sigmar lore piece. It's called Strongholds of the Realm, and they talk about specific areas within the, I guess, 4 realms, and what they're all about. So tell me if you already know these. The Perspicarium, Vostargi Mont, which is where the Fire Slayers come from. It's actually a fun story. The Great Gut Fort, which is sort of this city castle that was rudimentarily put together by ogres after looking at like Sigmarite towns. So stuff is just made of like jagged rock and just whatever they could find glued together. And apparently it's just this horrifying and stinky place. And then Shrappa Spill, which is where the Loon King resides. And then the faction focus for this month are the Lumenith Realm Lords. So elves, I believe. You can check out how to make your own faction, how their colors tie together, ideas on building lore for your own. And if you need a bedtime story for your children, you can read the Spear of Darkness, an Age of Sigmar story, following an Everchosen versus a Varangard, and you get to learn one of the worst ways possible to die. And I'm just going to interrupt myself here real quick to say that if you are enjoying this content and this review, please make sure to let me know by liking this video, subscribe if you haven't, if you're interested, and leave a comment. I want to know what you think of White Dwarf issues, what your favorite articles are, or what you think of my review. So anyway, that's it. Back to the video. The next article in here are some new Cursed City rules. So if you are into the Cursed City, this follows a plot line in an area of the city called the Clot, and you have to take control of this very feral area of the city. All right, some more Vashtorr lore for you folks. We've got some inquisitorial data slates coming in of reports from all over the galaxy talking about Vashtorr's influence. He seems to have a particular affinity for causing technology to come alive, grow things, and murder their masters. And for those of you who are familiar with War Machine and are familiar with the Crix faction, I feel like a lot of these Vashtorr-influenced models are going to have a very Crix biological techno feel to them. We'll see, but I'm getting that vibe so far. The next article continues the story of Stilled Faith from issue 496, in which you follow Space Marines that are trying to meet up with an Inquisitor acolyte, and they are fighting Gene Stealer cults. So they are trying to meet up and rendezvous with this group, but things aren't going so great for the humans. All right, over to the Tale of 4 Warlords. The February challenge is to add new units to your existing force, just any new units, paint up an entirely new combat patrol, or kit bash a character for your army. From there, we get an update from James with the World Eaters, Joe with the Space Marine Ingeniators, Rue with his Death Guard and his Heralds of the Plague Fleet, and Andy coming in with a whole Tyranid force with his Splinter Fleet Amarok. And for you bug players out there, the Tyranids have a new combat patrol list, new sneaky gits called the Insidious Infiltrators, which is an interesting theme that the new combat patrol lists are going for, because last time we had the Phobos Armor Strike team and they were infiltrators as well. So, is this going to be the new theme? Or what do you think will be the next combat patrol list they do, and why is it Astra Militarum? The new models are very simple. There's really only 3 types of Tyranids that you get. There is a Lictor, a Neurolictor, and like 9 Von Ryans Leapers. I don't know why they're called Von Ryans. If you know why, please let me know in the comments, because it's come up a lot. And I don't know why they're called Von Ryan Sleepers. But either way, it's a very simple list. You have to be somewhat specific and careful in how you apply them, because you only get 1 Lictor, and that's your hard-hitting model. You get 9 of these other models, but they can get torn down to shooting, especially since none of the Tyranids in this list have any sort of ranged weapon. So you gotta play it careful. You gotta be really careful with where you're positioning your models if you want to charge. And your leader there is offering cool psychic abilities that should help protect you, but you're basically a glass cannon is sort of how this is described. Alright, some of you may be excited for this. There are new kill team rules for Space Marine Scouts. And it's interesting, this kind of continues with this infiltration recon theme that I'm kind of seeing a lot more lately. The Scouts are, I guess, also sneaky gits. The kill team is comprised of 9 Space Marine Scout models. We've got 1 Sergeant, there's 2 Heavy Gunners, a Hunter, Sniper, Tracker, and Warriors. Now, the Warriors and the Hunters are the only ones that come with combat knives, and if you used to play Space Marine Scouts, you knew that they all had combat knives. So I don't know why these other ones don't. Instead, they just use their fists. In fact, thinking about these Space Marine Scouts got me going down a little bit of a rabbit hole to see what the original Space Marine Scouts looked like, and did you know they had lovely puffed and pained sleeves just like Snow White? Now you know that forever. And I think they need to bring it back. Speaking of nostalgia, there is a straight up Warhammer Old World battle report in here. Bretonnia versus Tomb Kings. And it's great because when you look at the pictures in here, they even take out the old 90s grass map. It is so lovely. You could open this magazine to this article and compare it to an article you would read in 1995, and it will be almost the same imagery. And P.S. Go Bretonnia. And lastly, we've got our Black Library segment, the Legacy of Defiance. This continues from an earlier issue where you follow the Tome Keeper Ushazar as he is researching old battles, and in this case really reliving battles that he himself was a part of over the last 500 years, and drawing connections to see why the Tome Keepers were attacked more recently, because there is a common link and he is trying to figure that out. And the more I read about the Tome Keepers, I think they are so interesting. I really am probably going to build a force out of them. But that begs the question, where can I read more lore about them? Do you have any suggestions for, say, Black Library books or other areas that I can read more about the Tome Keepers? Definitely let me know in the comments. I would very much appreciate it, and I will make sure to read those suggestions. And that concludes my review of White Dwarf issue 497. What was your favorite article in this month's issue? I think for me it was the Warhammer Underworlds segment. Again, being able to play the game without cards and making it that much faster, I think will make it easier to teach and give me more of an excuse to continue buying those boxes of Warhammer Underworlds factions. This is basically mostly how I have any Age of Sigmar models, by the way. So please let me know what your favorite article in this month's issue was, and I will make sure to reward you with a nice heart next to your comment. Alright, so until next time, take care.